the World Trade Organization convened in Seattle, Washington, and the United States in 1999, they were met by a series of demonstrations from anti-globalization movements, which included non-governmental organizations, trade unions, students, religious groups, and anarchists. With estimated numbers of protesters reaching over 40,000, it was not long before tensions between police and protesters erupted and the scene turned to violence. Adopted almost as an unofficial soundtrack for the situation was the music of Rage Against the Machine, a radical protest rock group born in Los Angeles in 1991. Although not part of the demonstrations in Seattle, the influence of Rage's provocative songs from their 3 original studio albums, along with their practice of social activism and promotion of direct action, had helped to educate a generation of 90s youths, many of whom would be there to fight for their voices to be heard and to stand up for what they believed in.
When Rage Against the Machine entered the national stage, there wasn't a really focused protest movement in the same way there was in the 60s. They combined the power of hip-hop and hard rock, 2 different forms that have 2 different protest traditions, and brought them together for a young audience that really appreciated both. Rage Against the Machine gave young progressive people their own voice, their own band, their own way to rally, and that's always so important in creating a spirit of protest among the young.
Rage Against the Machine is sort of the Malcolm X to Woody Guthrie's Martin Luther King. You know, there's a difference there. There's just a more aggressive form of protest compared to the more folky kind of thing that people associate with protest music. Woody Guthrie played an acoustic guitar and said, "This machine kills fascists," and, you know, Rage Against the Machine, they may actually come get you.
Rage was significant as a protest band in that they made protest popular again in American music. This is a band that was selling millions of records. It was selling out stadiums all across the United States. It was getting play on MTV. That was unprecedented. And also the type of politics that it was espousing, it seemed pretty strange for a band that radical to get signed to a major American record label, let alone sell all the albums that did.
Zach really spoke what he felt, and I think that's really what made that band great, because they really had this powerful voice and this really wonderful thing that had to be said.
Rage Against the Machine started life in Los Angeles in 1991. Lead vocalist Zach De La Rocha joined forces with drummer Brad Wilk and bass player Tim Comerford, along with Harvard graduate Tom Morello on guitar, to start work on a band that would bring the sentiment of protest back into mainstream music, where it had been absent for so long. Given the background of De La Rocha and Morello, Rage's 2 dynamic and passionate frontmen, it was no surprise that protest and social activism were the main driving forces of their music.
Zach De La Rocha, Tom Morello are both the children of 70s radicals. Very clearly the children of 70s political and artistic radicals.
Tom was a child of college-educated parents, so he grew up in that academic environment.
His mom, Mary, was as much of a radical as anyone. She, I think, instilled that activism in Tom from an early age. I think she was somebody who was very politically aware. She had a great breadth of experience. She lived in Kenya for a while. That's where, you know, where she met his father.
Zach, his mom was a grad student here at the University of California, Irvine in Orange County, while his dad was a member of a legendary Chicano art movement. The Chicano movement is basically Mexican Americans who were politicized during the 60s.
Beto de la Rocha, he was part of the Los Four, which was a Latino group of artists that had, big shows in the early 70s in Los Angeles. He was somebody who was, very conscious of what was going on and made a, distinct effort to kind of try and change things.
Both, interestingly, children of color who grew up in white suburbs because they come from mixed-race parentage, Morello does, and who experienced in these white suburbs of Chicago and Los Angeles racism from their classmates in grade school or high school, and who reacted strongly to that, who took that pain home and were told, in both cases by their mothers, you don't have to put up with this. This is bullshit. You know, and so they take these proud political ideals of their parents' generation forward to a younger generation.
So Zach grew up with both of those elements, so sort of the academic movement and then the more roots protest from the street movement. But also, by his own admission, he got radicalized here in Orange County. Of course, the rest of the world knows Orange County for its very horrible conservative politics and its vacuous housewives. So the story that he tells is that he was at University High School in Irvine, very prestigious high school. And during a biology class, his biology professor talks about this immigration checkpoint that's at the very southern tip of Orange County, and he called it, the professor called it the wetback station. And all the students laughed except Zach. He had never really given much thought to his Mexican identity until that point. And then he said from that day on, he just was really angry. He was really angry with racist, imperialist politics, and that was really the genesis of Rage, at least of the one part of Rage. But with Tom, it was already there.
The influence on Zach and Tom from both Mary Morello and Beto de la Rocha, coupled with their experiences of racism whilst growing up, lay the foundations for Rage's agenda to provide a voice for the disaffected youth of the day. Protest in art and music, however, was not anything new in American society by the time Rage Against the Machine appeared in the public eye, and had a long and important history in shaping the country and the world.
Well, think about the fact that all forms of art have protest. There's protest poetry, there are protest novels, there are protest paintings, but the phrase protest music is the only one that really echoes as a kind of cultural phrase. And the reason is there's something very, very powerful and special about music. It's incredibly movable. It can move from one place to the next. It doesn't require a lot of equipment, a lot of time, energy. And so there's been music protest for thousands of years. Every culture creates music that is used as protest because every culture has oppression, has inequality. And so it's a very, very adaptable medium, and that's why it's the central form of artistic protest in any kind of cultural context.
The thing about protest songs in general can be said that it's not the people who are satisfied with the way things are going that have created protest songs. You don't find many protest songs written by investment bankers or oil magnates. It's poor people or working people who wish for a better time, a better life. And that's nothing new. I mean, it's been going on for centuries. In this country, in the U.S., people have been protesting ever since they realized there was something to protest about. In my awareness of protest songs, it really started with, I guess you might say, the industrialization of the country in the late 19th and early 20th century.
Although protest in song had been around for centuries and in America found its roots in the Civil War, the key turning point in bringing it to a wider audience came during the early 20th century and the birth of the labor movement. The Industrial Workers of the World Organization, founded in 1905, led folk artists such as Joe Hill to voice their disapproval against the establishment.
There was an organization called the IWW, which got formed in the early part of the 20th century. And they also recognized the power of song, and particularly a Swedish immigrant named Joseph Hillström, who shortened his name to Joe Hill, and was a genius in terms of creating satirical songs about issues of the day.
Hill's work with the IWW from 1910 onwards, and his songs criticizing company bosses and the like, made him popular amongst the workers, but a perceived threat to the people in power. When Hill was arrested under suspicion of murder in 1914 and subsequently given the death penalty, it was alleged that his involvement in the protest movement and the IWW led to his poor treatment, unfair case, and eventual execution.
Joe Hill was a thorn in the side of the establishment, shall we say, and was treated like a political prisoner. Although he protested his innocence and probably was innocent, he was executed. And the name Joe Hill then entered into the legend of American protest music.